There are certain things that the average person might be afraid to even try to do. There are, however, also people who aren't afraid of anything. Some people might call these people crazy, but not all of them are psychotic. They're just fearless.
Bob Astor was trying to help everyone poor.
From an influential teenager to the world's most notorious villain, we're gonna take a look at the 15 most fearless people on the planet. Number 15. Malala Yousafzai. Everybody knows Malala, a true inspiration to the world. Her story could easily have become one of tragedy, but instead she chose to stand up and use her spotlight for good. Today she's widely considered as one of the most influential people on the planet. Now that's a legacy. On October 9, 2012, a gunman boarded Malala's school bus in Pakistan, asked her for her name, and shot her 3 times in the head. Malala had dared to speak out in favor of education for girls and women, and paid a high price for it. Somehow Malala managed to survive, and when she was on safe ground in the US, she decided not to live her life in fear. Overnight, this teenage girl became a worldwide figurehead campaigning for equal rights and justice. By 2013, Time magazine had listed her as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. 1 year later, she had the Nobel Peace Prize. Again, she was a teenager.
Women and girls there, I had the opportunity to talk to a few activists in Afghanistan, including women's.
Everybody would have understood if Malala was shaken from the incident and felt she had to live a quiet life, but instead she decided to stand up and continue campaigning for the basic rights of women. She is fearless. Before we go on, like this video, smash the subscribe button, and click the notification bell right now, or this centipede will crawl on your face when you're sleeping. It's time for the rare topic. For Indian snake trainer Raul, getting bitten by a snake is just another day at the office, and he doesn't even mind. I mean, look at his face. Raul doesn't flinch. He gets bitten countless times a day and seems unfazed by the bites, at least when they aren't lethal, which is hopefully always. Would you be fearless enough to be a snake trainer? Comment down below with the hashtag #RareTopic and let us know your opinion about what we just saw. With that said, let's keep things moving. Number 14. Adolf Hitler. Okay, not everybody is fearless in a good way. Adolf Hitler is rightly known as the world's greatest villain, a sick, twisted dictator that almost turned our planet into his kingdom, and he did it because he lived without fear, which ironically is the very thing that came back to kill him. The true terror of Adolf Hitler comes from the fact that he was actually a pretty intelligent and creative thinker. In the mind of a normal person, those things may be valued. In the mind of a dictator and a narcissist, it's a nightmare. Hitler had managed to brainwash and manipulate large groups of the population to get him to power. That kind of effortlessness tends to make people feel untouchable, and Hitler certainly felt untouchable, which is why when the Allies came together to defeat him, he actually felt fear for the first time. Rather than allow himself to face justice at the hands of the Allies, Hitler decided to commit suicide in his bunker, because for a narcissist, nothing is worse than being destroyed by someone you have publicly labeled weak, and Hitler was about to be destroyed by a whole bunch of weak countries. Number 13. Saddam Hussein. Obviously, fearlessness can be good or bad, depending on who is wielding it. Saddam Hussein was another terrorist dictator whose fearlessness influenced his horrific and despicable acts. But unlike Hitler, Hussein actually had to face up to his actions. Was he still fearless? I don't think so. Between 1979 and 2003, Hussein was the dictator of Iraq, and his reign was characterized by brutal attacks and unflinching pursuit of conflict. His policies alone made way for over 2 million people to lose their lives. And that's before we get to all the other attacks that he encouraged and arranged. Saddam was known to order chemical attacks, beatings, severe shock, tortures, deaths, executions, everything. Because much like Hitler, he was convinced that nobody could ever take him down. Something that wasn't true. In fact, Saddam was later found guilty of crimes against humanity and publicly executed, as he had done to others. Was he remorseful or fearless at the end of his life? Probably neither, but we'll never truly know what was going through his head at the time. Evil doesn't tend to know the meaning of the word regret, so I think we can safely say he wasn't looking back. Number 12. Amelia Earhart. Amelia Earhart is one of history's greatest inspirational figures, a woman who quite literally gave other women their wings. In fact, one of her most famous quotes encourages women to do things as men have tried and treat their failures as challenges. Man, she'd be amazing on Instagram. In 1928, Amelia Earhart made history, becoming the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. That would, of course, become the defining moment of her lifelong legacy, but Earhart wasn't content to just do one amazing thing and then retire to a life on a farm or something. In 1931, the same year she set a world altitude record, she joined the 99s, an organization of female pilots who united to encourage more women to take up aviation. In a time where just about everything but housework was a man's job, that was brave. Amelia Earhart had long described her fears as paper tigers, insignificant things that could easily be knocked down if she wanted. And yeah, when she disappeared in 1937 while trying to circumnavigate the globe, the world was shocked. But today her failure became, as she once said, a challenge to the rest of the world. Number 11. The Kims. North Korea has long lived under the rule of a dictator. In fact, it's reasonable to assume that everyone currently living there has lived under a dictator since birth, because since 1912, the country has been run by one of the Kims, a mafia-style family of dictators and narcissists.
누구든 감사의 눈물 없이는 대할 수 없는 것들입니다.
The Kim's reign of terror really begins with Kim Il-sung, who kickstarted the Korean War, killing 3 million Koreans in the process. And yet, the citizens were brainwashed into idolizing him as a god-like presence. When he died, Kim Jong-il took over to continue the family business of terror, and when he died, the Rocket Man himself turned up. Kim Jong-un has continued the inexcusable traditions of famine, executions, and torture. Kim Jong-un's fearlessness is notably different from previous generations, encouraged by the knowledge that he has nuclear weapons at his disposal. Obviously, the Kim's legacy in North Korea is one of devastation, terror, and intimidation, and sadly, it shows no sign of coming to an end. North Korea will likely continue to suffer under the oppressive thumb of this family for the foreseeable future. Number 10. Valentina Tereshkova. Almost 60 years ago, Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in space. In June 1963, she orbited Earth 48 times, set a still unbroken record, and broke barriers for women scientists, engineers, and astronauts. Talk about a pioneer, right? Before she was selected to be a cosmonaut, Tereshkova worked at a textile factory and was an amateur skydiver. Already you can see the badass streak, right? She joined the Air Force, trained as a cosmonaut, and was later commissioned as an officer. By 1963, she was all ready for her big moment. After a 2-hour countdown, the Vostok 6 launched smoothly, and Tereshkova became the first woman in space. She remains the youngest at 26 years of age. She logged more flight time on that single flight than any American astronaut has logged before. Tereshkova ejected from the capsule during its descent and landed safely by parachute in Kazakhstan. Now that is an entrance. Valentina Tereshkova lived a life of extreme adventure, that much is for sure. As part of her commitment to improving opportunities for women, she continued to work on further space programs that tested the limits of science and exploration. She is truly fearless. Number 9. Idi Amin. History is filled with dictators, despots, and political terrorists. Idi Amin is considered one of the most brutal in all of history, and his story is one of fearless ambition and a total terrifying lack of compassion. He's truly one of the most notorious political leaders in history. Idi Amin's rise to power is a perfect example of just how brutal and self-serving he could be. When Amin discovered that Ugandan President Milton Obote was planning to arrest him for misappropriating army funds, he led a violent coup and ousted the president. He was officially named the president of Uganda by the Provisional Military Government. Of course, Amin's rule was nothing short of horrific. Under his regime, human rights abuses were common, there was no freedom of speech or religion, and the government targeted ethnic minorities and persecuted political opponents. In fact, Amin's 6-year reign was characterized by widespread human rights abuses. Eventually, that fearlessness came to a brutal and karmic end. He was overthrown and exiled in 1979 by his once ally, Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi. Forced out of office, Amin went into exile in the Middle East, where he remained until his death in 2003. He's still widely considered one of the deadliest despots in history. Number 8. Dr. Leonid Rogozov. This is the true story of Soviet surgeon Dr. Leonid Rogozov, the first person in history to perform a successful appendectomy on himself. I mean, you have to be at least a little fearless if you've prepared to go at your own gut with a scalpel. Now, the Antarctic is not a place you'd expect to be filled with doctors, but in 1962, there were even fewer than usual. Dr. Rogozov was the only doctor stationed at the Novolazarovskaya station during the 6th Soviet Antarctic expedition. In the early hours of April 29, 1961, Dr. Rogozov woke up with a sharp pain in his belly and a worsening condition. The nearest research station was more than 1,000 miles away, and preparing to fly into such hostile weather conditions just wasn't an option. With no other surgeon to help, Rogozov's only option was to operate on himself. Despite being weakened from blood loss and abdominal pain, Rogozov performed a full appendectomy on himself, using a mirror as a guide. Anybody that's tried to write using a mirror will know that's an impressive feat in its own right. Number 7. Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo was not just a renowned artist, she was a cultural icon, one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, and a revolutionary woman in the cultural landscape of modern Mexican art. That's a fancy way of saying she was a legend in life and death. But Frida Kahlo's life was not anywhere near as colorful and enchanting as her work. Actually, her life was rife with tragedy. A devastating 1925 bus accident left her with spinal problems that lasted throughout her entire life. Later, she could not have children, suffering multiple miscarriages and the devastation that comes with it. But Frida's traumatic life and physical pain were the secret to her genius. All the pain of her past gave Frida the tools that she needed to create her art. At the time, Frida's paintings were controversial because she painted them from an empowering perspective. Today, that's the very thing that we celebrate. Frida Kahlo was a trailblazing artist who refused to let physical obstacles prevent her success. She bravely exposed the pain she felt through her paintings, taking everything life threw at her and turning it into art. That takes true guts. Number 6. Mad Jack Churchill. Imagine you're on the front lines fighting Nazis, and then you spot a dude on a white horse riding at you with a sword. Okay, I have no idea if he ever rode a white horse, but that's pretty much Mad Jack Churchill in a nutshell. Mad Jack was a British soldier who fought in the Second World War. Undoubtedly one of the most fearless soldiers ever to enter battle, Churchill was known for his love of using unorthodox methods to take down his enemies. One of his most famous quotes is also his life mantra: any officer who goes into action without a sword is improperly armed. To prove that, for the duration of World War II, he fought with a longsword, arrows, and a Scottish broadsword. In one instance, he added bagpipes to that collection of weapons, infiltrated a Sicilian town, and took 42 men prisoner, including a mortar squad. The guy was fearless, beyond all belief. In fact, Churchill may be one of the only people who was sad the war was ending. He's quoted saying, "If it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years. I can only imagine what weapon he would dream up next." Number 5. Coco Chanel. Arguably the most notable designer in history, Coco Chanel revolutionized fashion as we know it. While most designers were content to merely sell clothes for practical use, Coco Chanel believed that fashion was a way to celebrate life. Her bold creations and fearless attitude changed the industry forever. But Coco Chanel didn't just change the gender norms of the time through her own colorful personal life and career, she did it through her art. She believed that women were more than just a pretty face, and she single-handedly set the female body free through her creative designs. Chanel basically eliminated the corset, designing female trouser suits, and popularizing the smoking jacket for women, all highly controversial acts for the time. Chanel forced society to break away from the demure, boxy styles that were once popular and embrace something more progressive. She wanted her clothing to redefine the shape of the female form permanently. And you know what? She did that. Coco Chanel was a woman who overcame both the mental and physical barriers that society had placed upon her. She dared to ask women to do something unthinkable: wear trousers. And look what happened. She became the founder of a fashion empire that changed the world. Number 4. John Fairfax. Maybe you don't know him, but John Fairfax was a fearless adventurer who became the first person to row solo across the Atlantic Ocean in 1969. He then went on to become the first to cross the Pacific Ocean in 1971 and 1972. That's something to be remembered for, eh? And it seems his life was always an adventure. Fairfax's childhood was eventful, for lack of a better word. He had a troubled childhood, even getting expelled from the Italian Boy Scouts for opening fire with a revolver on a hut containing other scouts. Soon after, he and his mother moved to Argentina, where, aged 13, he left home to live in the jungle, like Tarzan. That's not a metaphor, he actually lived in the jungle. He survived by hunting and bartering skins with local peasants. Name me one other 13-year-old who can do that. Still, Fairfax's complicated childhood clearly motivated much of his adventurous spirit. And we haven't even covered the suicide by jaguar incident. His life truly was one unbelievably crazy instant after another. I guess that's what happens when you abandon city living to go and live like Tarzan. Number 3. Marie Curie. Marie Curie is one of the most influential scientists in history. Not only was she a pioneer in the field of radioactivity, but she was also the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes. And she paved the way for women in science, as well as future generations. Hell of a legacy. Yeah, Marie Curie was the first person, male or female, to win 2 Nobel Peace Prizes, but she did so despite enduring extreme prejudice from male colleagues. Many of the great men of science treated her as distinctly less than equal, but she didn't let the naysayers bring her down. She just pioneered X-ray technology, discovered polonium, and created the theory of radioactivity, but her greatest legacy is the tenacity she displayed as a woman in science. Marie Curie's courage and perseverance enabled her to succeed in the face of adversity, almost all of it sexist and misogynistic in nature. Marie Curie was a scientific pioneer. Her legacy lives on in the nearly 10,000 doctoral degrees awarded to women worldwide every year, a direct result of the glass ceiling that she blasted her way through. It may not have been easy, but she did it. Number 2. Savarsh Karapetyan. Savarsh Karapetyan is the best Finn swimmer in the history of the sport. Probably, I don't really know what Finn swimming is, but he's a 17-time world champion, so he's clearly great at it. But actually, that's not really what he's famous for. Savarsh Karapetyan is the best Finn swimmer in the history of the sport. When Savarsh heard a crash and saw a packed trolley bus sink in a reservoir, he felt compelled to jump in after it. He had never tried to save someone's life before, but, you know, sometimes the adrenaline just kinda takes you. In zero visibility, Karapetyan swam to the sinking bus. With his legs, he broke the back window and single-handedly rescued 20 passengers of the 92 on board. Despite his miraculous rescue, he could never play sports again. The incident had left him with multiple wounds and 45 days of unconsciousness. But he wasn't too concerned about the end of his athletic career. He was looking at a whole new job: superhero. It took a while, sure, but 10 years after that heroic rescue, he had another chance. Yep, he ran into a burning hospital and saved the people trapped inside. He's literally Superman. Number 1. Nora Ephron. Whether you've heard of her or not, you'll absolutely know Nora Ephron's incredible work. Ephron wrote and directed some of the world's most beloved romantic comedies, including When Harry Met Sally, You've Got Mail, and Sleepless in Seattle. Nora Ephron is a legend, that's all there is to it. A champion for gender equality, Nora Ephron basically taught women how to demand to be heard and seen. And not just in her movies, Ephron came into an industry that was, in every way, a boys' club and turned it into the industry she wanted it to be by sheer force of will. Ephron's movies are characterized by the strong and often painfully honest portrayal of women, a direct reaction to the often sexist and/or sexualized portrayal of women seen in movies made by men. Ephron basically made her mark on popular culture by fearlessly reaching into uncharted territory. Nora Ephron refused to play by anyone else's rules, and it's exactly that trait combined with her wit and compassion that made her an icon. As she would famously say, above all, be the heroine of your life, not the victim. Who's the most fearless person you've ever seen? Let us know in the comments. Also, check out our other cool stuff showing up on screen right now. See you next time.